Hello everyone and welcome back to Brain Muffin at the Movies. And here we have a very interesting article. While people are whining on and on and on about Mary Sue Ray and all that stuff, I came across this from slashfilm.com. How Star Wars: The Rise of Skywalker made me appreciate The Last Jedi, or how I learned to love old man Luke Skywalker. Some of you in the audience may know what that's referring to. It's kind of a callback, that type of title. For those of you who don't, Dr. Strangelove. All right, so I'll give you a hint. Go look up Peter Sellers movies. And when it comes to beloved genre film franchises, Star Wars stands alone. I'm not talking about in terms of box office numbers or household name recognition, but in the DNA of how the brand came to exist. Now, this is, I forgot to say, the author is Donna Dickens, it looks like. So, blogging the real world. Oh, okay, nice pun there. This is kind of long, I think. No, it's not too long. So I don't want to make boring. Unlike The Lord of the Rings or Harry Potter, a galaxy far, far away doesn't have the underlying structure of novels to hang its themes and narrative on. But we can in sentences and prepositions. And so, while the Marvel Cinematic Universe and the DC Universe have decades of source material, which, interestingly enough, Marvel knows what to do with, and DC just can't get out of its own way. Star Wars does not have that luxury, unless you count Legends lore, which is a gnarled tangle from which a handful of useful pieces have been salvaged. That may actually be accurate. Now, part of this is actually fairly inaccurate because the original movie, George Lucas had quite a bit of stuff he was pulling from. You had Campbell's the journey of the hero's journey, and he pulled cinematically from several other movies, but there was a concept of a bit of a lore. The script went through many rewrites and took several years before it got too far. So to say that there's nothing is a bit, to me, it does the originals a little bit of a disservice. Now, perhaps with Empire and Jedi, maybe not so much, but there's also Splinter of the Mind's Eye, which came out after what became A New Hope. So there were some ideas there, but, The Lord of the Rings, that's pulled from, Tolkien's desire to create a mythology for England that's really ancient, I think 6,000 years before the present, something like that. He pulled languages from real languages, Old Finnish and Old Norse, if I remember correctly. There's some Old English type stuff that breeds into some of those languages. So yeah, there's a lore, there's a source there, but again, it's created by people, and that's what's missing in a lot of the new movies. It's not just a cash grab. It's not just pew pew lasers, and lightsabers and flips. It's more than that. My point being that Star Wars is a multi-million-dollar machine that operates like a pantster instead of a planner. In fiction writing, there are two major schools of thought. Planners are very self-explanatory. They like to have an outline to know where the story is going and have a detailed plan of how to get there. Yep. That's how it's how you keep internal integrity and continuity. And Tolkien did this. And quite often his son found errors in his writing, especially of The Lord of the Rings, because things wouldn't happen right. So he had actually planned stuff out on a calendar. On the downside, planners can get bogged down in the details. Now, this sounds like someone who's never written anything but a short blog post. Part of the planning is also spontaneous. So you may know where you're going to go, but you're not 100% how you're going to get there. Refusing to set pen to paper or fingers to keyboard until every single that is not accurate. I actually know some authors, and that's not accurate. Then there are the pantsers, I guess. Pantsers? I don't even know what that means. These are writers who have a vague idea of where the story is going and just fly by the seat of their pants. Okay, pantsers. Okay, pantsers. Throwing themselves into the narrative and trusting the characters will lead the narrative where it needs to go. Now, people I know who do plan well, and well, depends on what they're writing. Some things are well planned because they're actually computer books and stuff like that. But as far as writing novels and things like that, many times you go through, and this is why you go through rewrites, because you might change your mind. But I've also known people who've let the characters, I want to go from point A to point B. I have a vague idea of what they want to do. I've done this in my own writings, and all of a sudden a character will pop up and say, oh, let me do something. Let me do something perhaps unexpected, but not necessarily out of character, especially if they're motivated to do something. And then you change that. But if you're going to, this is kind of like the waterfall nonsense with software development. It doesn't exist. So in my view, she's already created a straw man and an excuse. Let's see where she goes. The downside of this can be that without an outline, stories can meander and peter out or hit a wall after the author writes themselves into a metaphorical corner. That's correct. That's why you can plan. I'm going to go from A, B, C, D, E, and F, and I'm going to stop there. I'm going to go to A to B, and maybe some things change, and maybe I don't want to go to B anymore, and I go somewhere else, and then I go C, and we're throwing C out, but we're going to move D over, and then F is going to come next, and then we're going to go to E. Of course, many writers blend the two. George R.R. Martin has called himself a gardener. He knows the basic outline and plants the seeds, and then watches the story grow. See, I think that's what most people do. I wonder how many authors this person actually knows. I mean, not knows of, I mean knows personally. By far, my favorite method of fiction writing, though, comes from the late Sir Terry Pratchett. He called his style the Valley of the Clouds, in which a writer knows the big beats, the tops of the trees sticking out of the mist, and one must head down into the misty valley, fling themselves in the direction of the first tree and hope for the best. Yep. And I wouldn't be surprised if that kind of thing is what most people. All this is simply a long way to say that Star Wars has never quite sure where it's going until it got there. Yeah, maybe. You can see the film. This seems in every film, even though it gels together by the end. This is especially true of the sequel trilogy. Say what you about George Lucas and the prequels, but it was his world and everyone else was just living in it. Without a single unifying creative force in charge of the sequels, Lucasfilm made it more difficult to parse themes and character motivations. Correct. And I'm surprised to say that after watching The Rise of Skywalker, my first rewatch of The Last Jedi put to bed a lot of issues I formerly had with this film, especially when it comes to Luke Skywalker. Okay. And professional grunt. That's accurate. Context is king. Yes, it is. My full disclosure, I hated The Last Jedi when it came out. I still do. I hated it last year. I hated it when I saw The Rise of Skywalker, which I loved. Okay. I don't go into depth into my reasoning now, but you can see my thoughts. Okay, fine. Okay. If you want, after here. Yeah. Not very SEO of you there. After rewatching The Last Jedi in the wake of the context of The Rise of Skywalker and supplemental materials such as the Kylo Ren comic. Okay. Some of my favorite opinions have changed. Former opinions have changed. Okay. Prior to my rewatch, I went back through a lot of the discourse that happened when The Last Jedi came out. Several points came up over and over again. That it was good. That it was good. The Luke had finally acknowledged that. No, it's good that Luke had finally acknowledged that the Jedi were bad and needed to die. I don't agree with that. I don't think that was a point. I mean, I think that was a point of contention with many people. I don't know about bad, but they certainly were hubristic. That Rey being nobody was subversive and had to be taken at face value. I thought it was a cop-out. That Snoke was a new player on the board and unrelated to the former war. Sort of. And that let the past die, killed if you have to, was a good and noble goal. No, that's stupid. After rewatching The Last Jedi, I wondered how so many missed the mark so badly. Every one of these is refuted within the film itself. Okay. Now, this ought to be good because I have never heard, I guess this is people who liked the film. Because these were definitely bones of contention for people who hated the film. Although I must say, granted, I was quite inebriated when I watched this movie on Netflix. The discourse between Luke and Rey in the Jedi Temple about the Jedi, how at the height of their hubris, basically, they allowed Sidious to arise, I thought was a good thing. I'm like, that right there could be an entire trilogy. Kind of knowing and learning the mistakes of the Jedi. Of course, the new context released since then helped me see it. It's much like how knowing Vader is Luke's father changes how we view A New Hope, or how watching the Clone Wars added depth to what is otherwise an unnaturally quick betrayal of the Jedi Order by Anakin Skywalker. Now, I would agree with that. I think that he should have betrayed him somewhere. The seeds of betrayal should have been firmly planted in the first one, and by maybe a third way through the second one, he's starting to betray them and it's actually starting to fight them. And then the third film should have been all Vader. We should have seen Vader at the end of 2. What was that? I don't even remember what the second one was. And then the Revenge of the Sith should have been all Vader. It just should have been a complete bloodbath. Among the information I was armed with when driving back into The Last Jedi: how long Luke had been on Ahch-To, 5 years max. How old Ben Solo was when it all went sideways, 23, 24. He looks a lot younger than that. Luke knew who Rey was. There's some debate. Yeah, I'm not so sure about that. Luke's imposter syndrome struggle. Don't know what the heck that means. Leia's Jedi training and Force vision about Ben's fate, which I think was stupid. I don't mind her training. I think that makes a bit of sense in the novel she was. But you know, we'll see. These 5 points forever change the evolution of Luke's behavior in The Last Jedi. Does it? Does it really? From the moment audiences see him until the moment he triumphantly declares he will not be the last Jedi. Okay. He doesn't declare that. He just tells Ben, everything you just said is a lie, or something like that. To begin at the beginning, in the wake of, okay, usually you do start at the beginning. In the wake of the Battle of Endor, Luke Skywalker and Leia are going to travel to Agen Kloss, I guess, Agen Kloss, so Luke could train his twin sister to become a Jedi. While she only trained professionally for a year, she was paid to train for a year or less. Leia was already well versed in fighting the styles thanks to her upbringing. What about her upbringing gives her any fighting styles? She definitely knows how to use, we see in the original movies, she definitely knows how to use a blaster. In particular, the first one. She's a better shot than Luke. But most of her fighting, if you will, is political. And she's a leader. She is not well versed in hand-to-hand combat at any point in the original trilogy. The fact that she was able to build her own lightsaber with such a scant amount of training proves her competence with it. Yeah, but see, I don't know where this must be coming from something else. But she should have been, you know, it should have been years later. Leia then had a Force vision at the end of her Jedi training. Leia then had a Force vision that at the end of her Jedi training lay the death of her son. Okay. That's a very awkward sentence. In a failed attempt to subvert fate, Leia abandoned that path and once again became a diplomat, which she was before, and that's all we saw of her. So there's a bit of a jump here. We know from supplemental materials that Leia quitting, golly day, passive voice. We know from supplemental materials that Leia quitting gave Luke a crisis of faith. Okay. From supplemental materials, Leia quit. I don't know. He disappeared shortly after Ben Solo's birth. The implication being he was on a mission to learn more about the Jedi in order to properly train Ben and other Force-sensitive children instead of bumbling through it like an imposter. Okay. I'm going to have to just take this on faith to see where in the world she's going with this, because I don't know. The bumbling imposter. Oh, geez. God bless. Sometimes the magic mouse is an absolute pain in the butt. Where am I? Point of view, imposter. This is a further borne out by Kylo Ren comic, which shows Ben and Master Luke on missions to recover lost Jedi knowledge, but all went sideways 5 or 6 years before The Force Awakens, when Ben Solo becoming Kylo Ren and turning the dark side. In shame, despair, and depression, Luke fled. Okay, only 5 or 6 years. It sure feels longer than that in The Force Awakens. Which is where audiences pick up the story in The Last Jedi. The entire narrative arc, okay, was suppressed. Okay, I guess he would be. Golly day, I got too many paragraphs. The entire narrative arc of Luke Skywalker in The Last Jedi is him coming to terms with the fact that he's been selfish and wrong to hide away on Ahch-To. Okay, so, you know, it'd be nice. If that's the case, then why does he still hide out on Ahch-To and force project himself? He really should have been facing Kylo Ren face to face, not force projection. So he's still playing a sly, selfish prick at this point. Luke Skywalker that Rey finds feels like a failure, not a hero. You know, I can sort of get that, but as Mark Hamill has pointed out over and over again, you know, Luke was the most optimistic person, right? He thought he could bring his father back. You know, for him to just suddenly give up, it'd have to be something far more grievous. In other words, Ben needed to really turn. I mean, it should have been more than what we saw. Failed to see Snoke corrupting his nephew right under his nose. Well, again, I think that whereas with the Jedi, it was their hubris. Here, it's his optimism. I can bring him back. I can bring him back, kind of thing. So it wasn't that he should have felt that, but his over optimism is what would have been his undoing, as it were. There, he failed Ben and his other students. Rey handing Luke the lightsaber that once belonged to Anakin Skywalker. Another failed. Yeah, just have felt the same. You know, Anakin was not a failed Jedi. He was a frustrated Jedi, and there's a difference, and that's part of why he. You know, there were things that were going on. His mother dies. He feels alone, and he's frustrated that the Jedi won't train him faster. He knows he's very powerful, and he takes a shortcut. That's not a failed Jedi. Then there's a wrinkle that Luke Skywalker knows who Rey really is. I don't buy it. You can absolutely read the scene where he questions Rey about who she is and where she's from as him prodding to see if Rey knows her origins. He doesn't agree to teach her about the Force until he is satisfied. He doesn't teach her at all. When she has no idea who her grandfather is, but even that decision is still laced in fear. Now, see, this is reading a lot into because you've already set up that they don't have a plan here, and this, you know, so much of what JJ did in the Rise of Skywalker was a retcon of the Last Jedi, and so to me, this is putting way too much into what Rian Johnson created. This is getting really ridiculous. And if the grandson of Darth Vader fell to the dark side under Luke's tutelage, what chance would he be standing trying to teach Rey Palpatine to be a Jedi? God. This leads a whole new layer to Luke's panic during Rey's lessons. He has Rey reach out with the Force to feel how everything is connected. Then immediately after going on a bitter rant about how the Jedi were full of hubris, okay, fair, and that the light needs no enforcers, Rey feels the pull of the dark side cave. Luke metaphorically pushes her towards it with his own fear and self-loathing, and then freaks out when she went straight to the dark side like her grandfather before her. You know, see, what's interesting about this is when I watched the Rise of Skywalker, I'm not as negative on it as a lot of people I know, but I was sad because had the movie built to the Rise of Skywalker, had the movies been headed this way the whole time, and we had a you know, maybe the Last Jedi has a little bit more hint, you know, it's a little bit different because it's a different person writing it and directing. But had this been the way to go, and we didn't have to go back and find them. There were things we were following along the way. Of course, you know, Jar Jar can't hold suspense. He has to give everything away right away, and he did it in the Rise of Skywalker and the Force Awakens. And had it really been headed that way, and the payoff would have been fantastic in the Rise of Skywalker. And the problem here is this is reverse justification for The Last Jedi, even though the vast majority of it was undone in the first act of The Rise of Skywalker. So this, she is really reading in here. It was his worst fears coming true, the rise of another Palpatine and all his fault. And by the end of The Last Jedi, Luke Skywalker pulls it all together. Why? Because of Yoda, the little troll. He doesn't pull it together. After Rey fled the planet and her misguided notion that Kylo Ren would be the savior of the galaxy, Luke headed towards the Unity tree to set the sacred text on fire. No, but he couldn't do it and hesitated long enough for Yoda appears. I think he was contemplating whether to do that, because he complains to Yoda that he burned him. Okay. Luke threatens. No, he doesn't threaten to destroy that. He says the sacred Jedi texts. Yeah. The tough love Jedi parenting that was the catalyst that made Luke realize he wasn't ready to let the Jedi die. There was true anguish in him that Yoda would set such precious relics ablaze. Of course, Yoda clearly knew that Rey stole the books. Yeah, that I agree with. I think he did know that. The extreme intervention by Master Yoda shook Luke from... Yeah. See, now, if it really shook him from his depression, he should have gotten in his X-Wing, and he should have shown up. In other words, instead of them chasing the Millennium Falcon when Rey does her 360 no-scope triple kill, that should have been Luke. It would have had a completely different dynamic. And if so, if you're going to have him die, have him go out in a blaze of glory, something more heroic than him just fading away and no one knows. Try and rebirth the new Jedi Order. There isn't one. Choices a grown-ass man made on his own. Yeah, sure. There's hints of a good story here, but it's not in The Last Jedi. Kylo Ren is a bad person, guys. Coming to terms with Luke Skywalker's journey wasn't the only change of heart I had in the wake of my rewatch, The Last Jedi. Thanks to the reintroduction to canon that Leia Organa was a Jedi Master of a sort, her survival in the vacuum of space and subsequent coma from the exertion it took plays better for me. Yeah, kind of, sort of. This is a bit of a retcon, but it's something that could have been talked about and mentioned in the first movie. If and you don't make her general still, and she doesn't necessarily have to be a princess, but anyway, the dreadnought destroyed by the bomber in the opening scene of The Last Jedi is a prototype of the ships the Sith Eternal used, and the battery ram brought down to Crate looks suspiciously like a version of the planet-killing guns that would appear in The Rise of Skywalker. Yes, it does. It gets dumb. It just gets dumber. But most importantly, okay, let's see if we can get to the end here. Here's our last few paragraphs. In hindsight, it was absurd to ever give Kylo Ren the benefit of the doubt about Rey's parentage. As far back as The Force Awakens, the narrative showed that both Kylo and Rey could see each other's darkest fears. Rey used it against him during his interrogation and torture of her, flinging it into Kylo's face to throw him off balance. Yeah, you're afraid of Darth Vader. Yeah, of course, he would return the favor, especially as he was trying to manipulate Rey into abandoning the Resistance. Now, I will say this. That is exactly what I thought was going on when I first watched the one and only time I watched The Last Jedi. People went on and on about, oh, they're nobodies. And I'm like, it is a scene where Kylo is trying to tempt Rey, and in that he doesn't have a family, its own fault, but okay. She has no family, doesn't know who her parents are, but together they can be a new family. Now, you can do any kind of, Reylo shipping there that you want, but to me, I'm like, he doesn't know. And, maybe she had a repressed memory or something that's who they were, but of course that ship that she saw, and of course we see that in the Rise of Skywalker. Maybe that was her fear. Maybe that was her fear that they were just junk traders that traded her off and then left the planet and never to return. That's fine. That's like a kid being dropped off at the orphanage, and one side is a fear that the parents never loved them. The other side is that, my parents are rich, are coming back, or, they died. And that's, some children do that. So I can completely see that. After The Force Awakens mirrored A New Hope, it was almost expected that race parentage would be revealed in The Last Jedi as Luke's was in The Empire Strikes Back. The only subversion was Kylo Ren lying. Yep. I thought that's what I thought. To think that in the second to the last chapter of the Skywalker family saga it would be revealed that the current protagonist has no ties to that family's history is complete willful ignorance of story structure. Now, I absolutely agree there. I absolutely agree. But I know people who went on and they fawned on and on about, how we don't have to be tied in. And it was like, the prequels were full. There were thousands, if not tens of thousands of Jedi in training, of Padawans and younglings. Okay. All totaled. One of them was a Skywalker. One. Okay. One was a Palpatine. Well, Well, he wasn't a Jedi. I was Sith, obviously, and one was an Obi-Wan Kenobi. So why do people think that all the Jedi? That's of course the height of it. And now the only people that survive are, in the Skywalker realm, as it were, or that are known. And of course we have Broom Boy at the end, but I don't see that as a problem, that this concept that there are some force sensitive people starting to appear, because the whole point of the Force Awakens was that the Force has more or less been asleep, other than in Kylo, I guess. But go watch my video if you want on the day I saw that, on the 24th of December, whenever year it came out, 2015, is that right? Because it's like the Force Awoke. I mean, it's kind of silly. It is kind of a silly notion, but, especially true in light of what happens in the direct aftermath of the throne room fight scene. For a hot minute, Kylo Ren and Rey team up as the enemy of their enemy as your friend. But once Snoke's guards are dispatched, it becomes clear that Kylo was not changed. He didn't kill Snoke because Rey was guiding him back to the light, but because he wanted power and was angry that Snoke had manipulated him. That is true. I should say I agree. Rey's natural connection to the Force was simply another way to gain said power if he could control it. That I'm not positive of, because I think because he killed his father, and his mother's kind of estranged from him, gets blasted out in space and as far as he knows is dead. I think it's a family unit that seems so contrite, but that dynamic is not there. And it feels, again, this is going to be running into shipper territory, but I think that was in part what he was trying to wonder about. Because, unlike his father, he doesn't lose an arm. I mean, he gets his face slashed, but he's not becoming more and more mechanical. Anakin by that time lost 2 arms and a leg, and, had other implants, bionics, and Luke loses an arm in Empire Strikes Back, but he doesn't lose an arm. He loses fights, but he doesn't lose any appendages. So there may be this dichotomy of he's kind of, I wouldn't say pulling the light, but I really think that the concept of the gray Jedi could happen through Kylo Ren. But I digress. You come from nothing. You are not, okay. You have no place in the story. You come from, but not to me. So that he pulls from the pickup artist, but okay, and he is nagging her. That is true. This quote is a parade of red flags. It's straight up abuser talk. Yep, can be an attempt to isolate Rey and make her feel as if he's the only one who can validate her worth. See, I don't get that from. He doesn't have that. He doesn't seem to have that attitude. And then what we see in the Rise of Skywalker, with Rey healing him, I think that completes his journey to the middle. So I think he was being pulled in. I think it wasn't just a lust for power while he killed Snoke. I think he realizes what Snoke was doing to him and said, okay, I'm done with you and I don't need you. This is okay. But when he fails to sway her, Kylo Ren immediately falls back on his rage that she won't let the past die. That she is weak and still holding on hope. Okay. But, maybe. But of course, we shouldn't let the past die. We shouldn't kill it like Luke Skywalker, like Rey Skywalker. We should study it and learn from it. Take the good forward and evolve from the bad to keep it from happening again. Okay. That's not evolution, but okay. Burying the past only leads, or burying, if you live in Philadelphia, directly back to the sins of our ancestors. Kylo Ren is proof of that. Kylo Ren's suggestion of that. I think Kylo Ren swerved from that. Actually, I think Luke is the one who started that path, because he used the dark side to defeat Vader, cut his arm off, but he pulls back. He looks at his own hand and pulls back, and that's when he throws his lightsaber away and says, you failed. He's defeated Vader. He's not taken his place, and he's content to realize that he's going to die. And then, of course, Vader chooses, Anakin chooses to come back and rescue him. So, I value stated above, other than Rey as Palpatine on my first viewing, until the others didn't. Okay. There's a part about how everything Kylo Ren says to Rey is an attempt to manipulate her. So that, use is such a strong word. I'd be very careful with that. I loved old Luke as soon as he showed up, but by far the most interesting, entertaining part of the character. Blue milk and all. Okay. As much as I disliked The Last Jedi initially, one thing is true: it wasn't creatively bankrupt like The Rise of Skywalker. These people are just ill. I think you read a lot of things that weren't there. That I agree with. I think that's the point of the article. The context is key. Yes, but if they didn't mean that, then it is the reader who is inserting meaning and context that doesn't exist. That's the problem. Yes, but it's no different now for watching A New Hope. The context of Vader is Luke's father instead of 1977 narrative that Vader killed Luke's father. Yeah, perhaps, but that was done within the context of the movies, not you didn't have to go back to A New Hope and pick out stuff and say, oh, he didn't do that because he knew he was his father. When the audience has to creatively fill in holes with material that isn't there, then that is the cult of fan fiction. Drive from watching The Last Jedi and Chosen to understand. Okay, a very interesting take on these films. I'm not going to lie. This right here is the same reason I learned to enjoy the prequels. A lot of the love, okay, I don't know. Last Jedi basically blew a hole in the middle of a trilogy. It was an okay movie on its own, but added nothing to the story that they started. If anything, Rise of Skywalker magnified the problems that Jedi introduced. That's true. I agree with that. I didn't think this new trilogy is either clearly all over the place. Was part 7 of 9 being written by a committee and CEO directives to cash in on. Exactly. And part 8 was an out-of-control deconstruction by one single person given creative control. If there's anything unifying theme or world building here, I don't see it. I don't see it unlike, say, Mad Max or Marvel. Rise Skywalker doesn't match the bunch of I find okay, but I think she's reading a crap ton into The Last Jedi, even in light of The Rise of Skywalker. Because those plot points were not known. Lucas had an overall vision where he wanted to go with the Empire. He let other people help him get there, but he was the key master, as it were. And even in Return of the Jedi, same thing. We didn't have that here. Now, if JJ would have been in charge of the entire narrative structure and then gave Rian Johnson some creative license within that structure, I think we would have had an incredible payoff movie. But it's just a cash grab. That's all it is. And, it grabbed a lot of cash from the movies. And people are talking about the box office. The box office is only part of the story. The merchandising is falling. It's in free fall. It is in complete. Go look at any toy section now, and you will see a smaller toy section. Probably, I don't know how far back in time you've got to go to see when there was actual Star Wars merchandise with a movie out for a month, and you can literally buy everything and shove it into the trunk of a subcompact car. That is sad. Okay. And that's never happened before with Star Wars. And it is, brand wise, it is dead. So I don't know. Do you agree with Donna? Do you think she's reading too much into it? Do you think she's on the money, or at least headed in the right direction? And maybe there's some other stuff you'd like to discuss. Let's have that discussion. Thank you so much for stopping by. And if you like content like this, for me to create more of these, please click the like button and please click subscribe to let me know that you really enjoy this and want my take on all kinds of stuff. And if there's an article you really want me to read too, just let me know. Put that in the comments and I will get to it as soon as I can. Thank you very much. Goodbye. All right. 3, 2, 1. Donna Dickens. Is that her? Okay. Where's this slash film? 3, 2, 1.